Hello everybody and welcome back to my sunroom here on this beautiful day in East Tennessee. It's November now and I feel like I'm on an orchid vacation because our temperatures have just evened out nicely. This week it's been about 70 degrees most days. Next week it's supposed to be even warmer than that, about 75 degrees, but the humidity has gone way down. And it has really changed up the way that I've been watering and fertilizing my orchids. All of my phals are now spiking, and so that means that every time that I water, I do fertilize, because in the winter, I'm going to give them a bit of a break. I really pull down the parts per million in the winter because they don't need so much when they start blooming. But for right now, every time I do water, I am using about between 270 to 300 parts per million of the Jack's Part A and B. If you all want to see what that looks like, I'll place a link to my video about my fertilizer in the description box below. And it's just a really good time of the year to sit back and just enjoy my orchids, because right now I'm not having to water them all that much. A lot of people will tell you you water your orchids once a week or every 5 to 10 days. Well, I used to take that like as you have to. You know, that's an ironclad rule. But depending on what you're using, like let's say you are in, you have a Phalaenopsis that's in a bark and moss mixture, or, you know, layers of bark and moss. You're not going to be watering them that often this time of the year because the temperatures are just not that high, not nearly as high as they were during the summer. Even my phals that are growing in just bark, they don't require as much water right now as often. I am able to go 10 or 11 days without watering my Phalaenopsis orchids right now. It's just not that hot. So what I'm doing is I am lifting the pots, and especially when they're grown in a transparent pot like the ones that the orchid supply store sells, you can see immediately if the roots are silver, then it's time for them to be watered. If they're still green and you can see moisture in the pot, then you can put off that watering another day or two. Several of you have asked me, which one do you like the best, the Orchiata bark or the Rexius fir bark? And the answer is yes. Both of these I highly recommend. I really wouldn't use anything else but Orchiata or the Rexius fir bark. I've used bark for 20 years. These are the best two products that I have used as far as bark is concerned. And of course, you all know I use New Zealand spag moss. It is the finest spag moss on the planet. I love that stuff too. And that is available at my sponsor, the Orchid Supply Store. They have everything that you need for your orchids, everything. They have the bark, the moss, the pots. See, I love these pots, the transparent ones with the holes on the bottom. And you can tell when your plants need to be watered when you grow in these. So I really like using these transparent pots. And also, if you have to do an emergency repot, it's kind of late in the year for me to be repotting. I wouldn't be repotting any of my Phalaenopsis orchids right now because they are all spiking. So that's when my repotting season ends. But let's say you have to do an emergency repot. You can call the Orchid Supply Store, or you can order online and ask for a pot in one so that you don't have to keep supplies all through the cold winter months. So you can get a pot plus any medium that you like in that pot in one. I think that's just a wonderful idea. And I'll place a link below to the Orchid Supply Store's website. And also don't forget to use my coupon code AMY for a 12% viewer's discount. And here are two of my orchids that I placed in my moss and bark sandwich. What that is it's bark on the bottom, moss in the middle, and bark on the top. And it really does help with watering. I don't water these very much. As you know, I was having issues with trying to keep my miniatures watered over the summer. I couldn't go 2 days without watering them. So I decided to do this moss and bark sandwich, and it has worked beautifully. So what I do is I lift the pots to see if they're heavy or if they weigh practically nothing. When I say practically nothing, that means, you have an image of what the plant itself weighs, and when you lift that plant and it just doesn't weigh anything, then it is time to water it. But also, you can tell by the amount of moisture in the pot. The roots are nice and green, and this is a heavy pot. I just watered it the other day. It might be able to go 2 weeks without being watered again this time of the year with these cooler temperatures. The sun's rays are just not as hot right now as they were back in the summer here in East Tennessee. So you're between seasons, your fall and your spring. That's when you kind of have to stop and say, okay, it's not hot, it's not cold. The heat's not cutting on, the air conditioning's not cutting on. So how often do they really need to be watered? And be lifting your pots and making a mental note of what they weigh when they're heavy with water, and make a mental note of what they weigh when they really need to be watered. There's no set time that is right or wrong to water your orchids. Just be mindful of what you're doing. If you see a lot of moisture in that pot, it just doesn't need to be watered yet. Especially if it's a Phalaenopsis, if it's a Cattleya, if it's a Dendrobium. If it's an orchid that specifically likes more moisture, then that's a special care orchid, and you have to be aware of its watering needs. But I'm just talking about the Phalaenopsis, the Cattleyas, the things that so many of us have in our collection. Just be mindful not to overwater them this time of the year, the in-between seasons. So my Phalaenopsis orchids, including my Belina, including my miniature Phalaenopsis orchids, they get fertilized every time that I water. My Belina is getting ready to bloom. Okay, hang on. I need to show you my Belina. Look whose first bloom is about to pop open. Yes, this is my Phal Belina Matuo King. And I cannot wait until that bud pops open, but she is getting ready to bloom. And once she starts blooming, I will be fertilizing her every other time that I water. They don't need quite as much fertilizer when they're blooming. I don't back off to nothing, but I do every other time. And here's my brand new Vanda. It's only been in my collection now for about a month, but as you see, it's doing great. And I fertilize it at 300 parts per million every time I water it, and it's doing great. This is in a bark and moss layered pot. I think that when you have moss in your pot, it's going to retain not only more moisture, but it's going to retain those nutrients as well. So I have gone 5 days without watering this Vanda. As you see, I've got a root here that I am placing a damp paper towel on because I'm trying to get the root to drain down into the bark medium here. Yeah, I'm hoping that that works, and it seems to be. But I do, on the days that I don't water it, I do miss the roots, or I place a damp paper towel on top of the roots, and that really does help keep the humidity up around the plant, and the roots just really like it. It's been growing really well. My new Limelight Cats that I bought back in August, their new growths have matured. That was fast. And So what I'm doing is I'm fertilizing them every other time. I don't really know when they're going to be blooming. I'm hoping that they bloom at the same time as my other ones, but I can't wait until they bloom. They can bloom anytime they want, but I don't see any flower sheaths yet. And my little Neophonetia falcata, oh my goodness, this little guy, he is just so cute. Look how he has grown. He's tripled in size since I got him back in June. And what I'm doing with him right now is I'm fertilizing him about twice a month at about 200 parts per million. That new growth is completely mature, so until I see new growth on him, I don't think that he needs a big boost of fertilizer. My beautiful miniature Dendrobium champu. I was about to talk about her, and then I got really excited about sharing my first Belina Bloom with you all. Let's go back to champu here. This is a beautiful spike of blooms this year. And what I do is, while a cane or a spike is growing on her, I fertilize every single time. That's every 2 or 3 days in the summer. And then once she blooms out, I only water about every 4 days, and I fertilize every other time. So you can kind of see the cycle that I go with. If a cane or a leaf or a spike is growing, that's when I fertilize. When they bloom, I don't fertilize as much because they just don't require that much. It's not that I don't ever fertilize them when they're blooming, but I only fertilize every other time I water. I just don't fertilize them as much when they're in bloom, maybe twice a month, and that's plenty. And I hope that that has answered some questions for you all as far as watering and fertilizing during the fall season when it's just a lot cooler. Of course, your fall might be a lot different than mine. Your environment might be completely different than mine. But just remember that when you're in a cooler season with your weather, that's going to change your watering and your fertilizing schedule. So before I end this video, I would love to say the blessing over you, your families, and your plants. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn His face toward you and give you His peace. You all make it a great day, and we will talk to you next time.